Geoff Dyer, as you all know, was described by the Daily Telegraph, I think it was, and I'd like to add that it was the British one, not the local Sydney one, as the best living writer in Britain. So that's what it says in your book.
It was actually
possibly the best living writer.
No, it was the best possibly living.
Best possibly. Wonderful. Anyway, his latest book is Zona, a book about a film about a journey to a room, and that is mostly what he's going to be talking about today. But of course, we did call this session Geoff Dyer Could Say Anything, and I dare say he will. He'll also be talking about Working the Room, his collection of essays, and I also dare say that's probably what he's going to be doing today as well. He's here to work the room. So I'd like to invite Geoff, without further ado, to get busy with it.
Sure thing, yeah. Well, I thought it would be nice to have Chip on stage, just as sort of reassuring presence. You know, he's a great-looking guy, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I thought what I'd start by doing is just by telling you something about the way that I came to write this kind of mad book, really. And I suppose what I'd begin by saying, I'll do that rather vulgar thing. I'll begin by quoting what I said to my agent about it. I said, I think you'll agree it's my greatest achievement. But we have to go back a way for that to make some sense. We have to go back in time. Okay, so I wrote that book, Geoff in Venice, Death in Varanasi. It was a novel, and I moved publisher. And when you move publisher, like a football player who makes a move, you know, when he's sort of in the advanced stages of his career, you know, they want to know if he's got how much more, you know, are the knees going to pack in? So they didn't want to buy just one book, you know, they sort of said, what are you going to do next? And I said, without any thought at all, I'm going to write a book about tennis. And this was great news. But we have to go still further back, because when I was writing that book, Geoff in Venice, Death in Varanasi, I was so preoccupied with tennis that at one point, and I'd always come home saying, oh God, my backhand is just falling apart, and this, and it was, you know, there's a rule in life, really, that if you're playing tennis more times per week than you're having sex, your marriage is in trouble. My marriage was on the rocks. This might not apply to somebody like Rafael Nadal, but at the amateur level, it certainly does. Anyway, my wife said, you know, if you spend as much time writing this novel as you did fretting about your tennis game, you'd have written it by now. And a penny dropped, because I've always written exactly about that which I'm most interested in at any one time. And I thought, I should write a book about tennis. But I couldn't do that because I was really pledged to, I really wanted to finish writing this novel. Anyway, so when I did finish writing the novel, I had, you know, this came up, and this whole thing of this tennis book. So I was also thinking that I wanted to start acting more like a career writer. You know what these career novelists are like? They finish a book on the Friday, they go shopping at the weekend, then they start another one on the Monday. Whereas I always finish a book, sink into a deep depression of idleness. And I thought having a contract to write a tennis book would mean I could keep the momentum up. But that was so stupid, because the momentum for me is not transferable from one book to the next, because the books are all so different. And so what happened is that as I found I didn't want to write this book about tennis, I did sink into my usual pattern of depression and idleness, which was all the more intense because I had a contract to write the tennis book. I hate having a contract. It was just dreadful. It's just awful. Then a screening in London was happening of this great film that I've loved so much, Stalker by Tarkovsky, and there was a panel discussion afterwards with a number of people. And I was thinking, why didn't they ask me to? You know, why didn't they? Everybody knows I like this film. Of course, nobody did. And then I actually wrote a little thing for a newspaper about it. And in the course of that little piece, just 1,200 words for The Guardian, I just started really, I hit upon a tone whereby I realized that just for my own amusement and as a way of bunking off from the tennis book, I just started summarizing the film. It was just great. And whereas I'd been in this state of abject despair with not writing the tennis book, I was sitting at my desk, tippy-tap-tap, having a great time. I was just so happy. And I just kept summarizing the film. And the point came, of course, when I realized there was a whole book's worth of here. So eventually, and the publisher's interest in the tennis book was considerable because Andy Murray was poised to win a Grand Slam. The book had great commercial appeal. Fortunately, I would be sitting there praying for Andy Murray to lose, just so that... Anyway, the moment came when I handed in this book, which I was contracted to deliver about tennis, and it had turned into a book on Tarkovsky. And when this is the context in which I said to my agent, I think you'll agree that in terms of my disregard for what a publisher might reasonably expect, or for the commercial potential of a book, this is my greatest achievement.
If only publisher contracts were written that way.
Yeah, I mean, so they were all great respect to my publishers for allowing me to do this, because this is the kind of book where no publisher on earth would have agreed to publish this book on the basis of a proposal. Because for a start, there's nothing to propose, or what little there is so ludicrous. And I kind of like that, though. I like this. I think there's a problem with some non-fiction books whereby what the finished book does is it fulfills the terms of the proposal. It writes up the proposal in longhand. And then quite often you get a serial deal whereby a newspaper extracts from the book the kind of essence of it, whereby it shrinks again to being about the length of the proposal. I like the so in a way, this is much more like the kind of way a novelist would proceed, whereby you write something and then hand it in and just hope for the best. So that's what happens with this.
So in the end, it becomes a Geoff Dyer book rather than a Zona book. That you should be doing contracts for another Geoff Dyer book.
Yeah, that's it.
Because you don't know. You do not know where you're going to go.
Exactly. I'm along for the ride too. And it's one of the things that keeps me writing is that there's always stuff I want to find out about, and goodness knows there's nothing like writing a book in order for if you want to find out about something, write a book about it. You really do learn a lot. And also, each of the books is really, I guess, some sort of journey of discovery. And in this instance, that's so appropriate because the film is precisely that. It's a journey into this place, the zone, at the heart of which they will both discover whether this place, the room, really does deliver, and they'll also, as a result of that, discover the truth about themselves.
How many people here have seen the film? Just to get a good sense.
So everybody else is here just for Chip. Sorry, I mean for me. Rather than there's all sorts of writers here at the Sydney Festival, and they're let's face it, they're doing their boring old readings, but we have lined up for you a multimedia extravaganza.
Only 5 minutes before we started.
Yeah, that's right. So just to give you a sense now of what this crazy book is like, we're going to show a couple of clips from the film, and then I'll read the book over it, if that's okay. So, Shona, if we could
we're all set up over there.
We're going to show the first clip, if we may. That would be great. Thank you. This is how the book begins. Yeah, great. An empty bar, possibly not even open, with a single table no bigger than a small round table, but higher, the sort you lean against while you stand and drink. If floorboards could speak, these look like they could tell a tale or two, though the tales will turn out to be one and the same, ending with the same old lament. After a few drinks, people think they can walk all over me. Not just in terms of what happens here, but in bars the world over. We are, in other words, already in a realm of universal truth. The barman comes in from the back, lights a cigarette and turns on the lights. 2 fluorescent tubes, one of which doesn't work properly. It flickers. He looks at the flickering light. You can see him thinking, that needs fixing, which is not the same thing at all as, I'll fix that today, but which is very nearly the same as, it'll never be fixed. Daily life is full of these small, repeated astonishments, hopes that it might somehow have fixed itself overnight, and resignations it hasn't and won't. A tall man, a customer, enters the bar, puts his knapsack under the table. He's tall but not young, balding, obviously not a terrorist, and there's no way that his knapsack could contain a bomb. But this unremarkable action, putting a knapsack under the table in a bar, is not one that can now go unremarked, especially by someone who first saw Stalker on Sunday, February the 8th, 1981, shortly after seeing Battle of Algiers. He orders something from the barman, whose white jacket also serves as a towel, possibly as a dishcloth, and maybe as a hanky too. The whole place looks like it could be dirty, but it's too dingy to tell, and the credits in yellow sci-fi Cyrillic do not exactly clarify the situation. It's the kind of bar men meet in prior to a bank job that is destined to go horribly wrong, and the barman is the type to take no notice of anything that's not his business. And the more things that are not his business, the better it is for him, even if it means that business is so slow as to be almost non-existent. Far as he's concerned, long as he's here, minding his own business and wearing his grubby barman's jacket, he's doing his job. And if no one comes and no one wants anything and nothing needs doing, the wonky light can wait, as can most things. It's all the same to him. Still smoking, he trudges over with a coffee pot. He's one of those barmen who makes the simplest task feel like the labours of a minimum wage Hercules. He pours some coffee for the stranger, goes out back again and leaves him to it, to his coffee, to his sipping and waiting. Of that, there can be no doubt. The stranger is definitely waiting for something or someone. We'll have another clip in a moment.
So it really is like, yes. This really is like a value-added experience. I mean, is there going to be a DVD coming out of Stalker with your readings over it like that?
Well, I mean, in a sense, this, the film I regard now as no more than a trailer for my for my book. It's really frustrating, though. I mean, did some of you come to the screening last night? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we were hoping to show a print of the film. Prints are really quite hard to come by. There is not a single print of Stalker in the whole of the North American continent. And last night we showed it from a DVD. It's really unfortunate. I don't know, maybe we could have tweaked it a bit, but the film on a print, it's a weird thing. It's much, much duller than the DVD. But in a weird way, the dullness of it kind of gives it this kind of luminosity, and I felt it didn't have that really. So it was diminished, and the whole sort of textures of the colour were lost. But
well, we're so pleased to have done that for you.
Oh, yes, thanks. Sure, I shouldn't be so. This is just.
You really are just an analog man living in a digital world. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, because it's such a. I mean, okay, just to sort of go back to that rather jokey sort of introduction. There's the thing about Tarkovsky is that there's a considerable, there's a massive cult of Tarkovsky, the great, sort of Tolstoyevsky figure, and he kind of. I don't know. It's always the films are always discussed in this incredibly reverential, rather solemn way. And one of the things about my book, it's got that. I mean, it's nice to see you, to hear you laughing. But the thing is, my admiration and love of this film is, it's unqualified. It's so great. But in a weird way, it seemed to me that there was. I could reveal certain things about the film with that tone, which a kind of reverential approach wouldn't. Solemnity is not a great analytical tool. And also, I mean, one of the things that I've tended to do throughout the books is arrive at this tone where I could combine both comedy and sort of a more analytical thing. And the other thing that I should say is that it's not a kind of textbook about the film. Watching the passages about the film become kind of imbricated with these other passages about, partly about my experience of seeing the film. I've seen it in lots of different places, and also trying to work out why this film has had such a deep hold on me. So now what we're going to do is kind of show another passage from the film, and I need to just set this up a little bit for you. The Stalker takes these two people, writer and professor, into the zone, and there's a long sequence when they're on this trolley car. I think it lasts about 4 minutes, and we're going to pick it up probably for the last 10 seconds of that sequence. When they're there'll be 10 seconds of silence, then I'll start reading. And then we're going to be treated to one of the amazing moments in in film, I mean. So you'll see it. Something really quite mind-blowing happens. So, Shauna, number 2, please, with the guy's face in black and white. Great. It lasts long enough, this sequence, to lull us into a kind of trance. There then occurs one of the miracles of cinema, one of several miracles in a film about an allegedly miraculous place. It's not a jump cut or fade, but suddenly and gently, the clanging and echoey clank of the music and trolley are still on the soundtrack. Unambiguously, we're in colour and in the zone. You can watch the trolley car sequence again and again, can refuse to succumb to its hypnotic monotony, and you can never predict where it will come, this moment of subtle and absolute transition. Camera and trolley continue clanking forward for a few moments and then come to a halt. The camera pauses and moves back. We are there. We are in the zone. It's every bit as Stalker claimed, and at the same time, quite ordinary. The air is full of the sound of birds, of wind in the trees, running water, mist, muted greens, weeds and plants swaying in the breeze, the tangled wires of a tilted telegraph pole, the rusting remains of a car. We are in another world that is no more than this world, perceived with unprecedented attentiveness. Landscapes like this had been seen before Tarkovsky, but I don't know how else to put it. Their beingness had not been seen in this way. Tarkovsky reconfigured the world, brought this landscape, this way of seeing the world, into existence. Many forms of landscape depend on a particular artist or writer or artistic movement to render them beautiful, to make the rest of us see what has always been there. But it's not only the unchanging, eternal, natural world that needs to be mediated in this way. Walker Evans opened our eyes to the sagging shacks, wrecked cars and fading signs of America in the 30s. To that extent, Evans anticipated Robert Bresson's reminder to himself in Notes on the Cinematographer. Make visible what without you might perhaps never have been seen. A little later, Bresson added a medium-specific twist to this ambition. Quality of a new world, which none of the existing arts allowed to be imagined. Two related questions then. Would we regard this landscape of fields, abandoned cars, tilted telegraph poles and trees as beautiful without Tarkovsky? And could it have been brought into existence by any medium other than film? If Stalker had not been the first Tarkovsky film I saw, I might have recognized elements of this landscape from his earlier Mirror, the cross T's of the telegraph pole, the greens made more lush somehow by being subdued, the distinction between the man-made and the natural being eroded before our eyes. If I had seen Mirror, I might have recognized this landscape, these elements, as Tarkovsky land. I might have echoed the first words uttered by Stalker. Here we are, home at last. And yet, at some level, I must have recognized, or at least been familiar with a modest and local variant of this kind of landscape, which perhaps accounts, in part, for why the film has made such a deep impression on me. There's just one train station now in Cheltenham, where I grew up, but in the late 1950s and early 1960s, there were 4. One of these, Leckhampton, was only a 5-minute walk from where we lived. And my father used to take me up there when I was a toddler to watch trains steam in and out. The line and the station closed down in 1962 when I was 4. I've no recollection of going there with my dad, only of his telling me that we used to. But I have strong memories of heading off to this abandoned, brambly zone to play with a couple of friends when we were 8 or 9. The windows of the disused station building had been smashed and the rain had seeped in. It looked as if it had long ago fallen into decay. Faded, rain-buckled, the timetable was still displayed as a memorial to its own passing. An empty packet of Player's cigarettes, the ones my mother smoked, with the face of the bearded sailor on the front, gone to a watery grave at the bottom of a puddle. Frog-spawny, rust-coloured, pond-size, cloudy with gnats. The tracks had rusted, were overgrown with weeds, grass, stinging nettles, dandelions. Sometimes we followed them for a while, beyond the ends of the platform, but never as far as the next station along the line, also abandoned, a couple of miles away, in Charlton Kings. Here we are, says Stalker, home at last. Great, thank you. By the way, isn't that sequence, that moment when we go into colour and in the zone is just amazing. I should say also, when it was first shown on TV in Britain, on Channel 4, very serious channel, I mean incredibly serious channel. It's a commercial channel, but they showed the whole of Shoah, and the 8-hour film about the Holocaust without advertisements. Serious place. Obviously, somebody there had taken a look at this film at the beginning, thought, oh, it's a black and white film, and they broadcast the whole film in black and white, which means effectively they never got into the zone. So
you take us into the zone, whether we've seen the film or not, and I think one of the reasons we invited you, apart from you just being an absolutely brilliant writer and wanting to have you any year in any book, is that this year in particular is that where our theme is, as our chick up there shows, the line between the private and the public, and it's about personal obsessions, and it's about those things that drive a writer to write. You mentioned before that there is a whole body of writing about this film and about this director that is perhaps too reverential or treating it in too sort of serious ways, and not having that light touch and not having that personal touch. You've come up, I guess, butted up against a number of film theorists or writers about film, about the approach you've taken. Do you want to?
That's right. Well, the thing is, yes, it's not a dissection of the film. It's so bound up with all the sort of vagaries, of all the contingencies, of the different ways I've seen it. And the thing is it's not the case that I thought, I'm going to write a book about a film, and then I rolled the roulette wheel to see which film I would do. Oh, it's Stalker. This film has meant so much to me, and something the thing about the film is it's this literal journey into this place, the zone, which, as you've seen just from that clip, it's simultaneously absolutely magical, and at the heart of it, it's alleged is this room where your deepest wishes will come true. But it's always completely ordinary as well. Now, what happens is, as they get nearer to the room, so the actual physical journey becomes progressively more bogged down in both literally bogged down because it's so wet and drippy and stuff, And also, it becomes bogged down in these kind of metaphysical, philosophical discussions about, about what it will mean to get to the room. What this meant is that it lent itself very well to it. Really, since I'm very weak on plot, but better on sort of digressions. Well, the great thing is the film was providing me with a plot, and as soon as you've got a journey, you've got automatic narrative. Then it seemed entirely appropriate that I would go off on these sort of, obviously I'm not a professional philosopher, I can't even read academic philosophy, but philosophy in the sense that in my inadequate understanding of the term, I was able to do these things. So as we get nearer the room, so I start to grapple with this idea of how do you work out what your deepest desire is? So I'm going to read a third bit now, but actually it doesn't require any film clips. So we're not going to show any more film clips, Shauna, so you're off the hook. Let's just to give you a sense of how the book sort of broadens out into a different kind of consideration. So bear in mind, at the heart of the zone is the room where your deepest wish will come true. We think we have huge goals in life, but actually, when it comes down to it, we'll settle quite happily for something trivial that we've had all the time and which made our lives bearable. I remember one of several conversations with my mum and dad about what they'd do if they won the football pools. The football pools. That, for many British people, was their equivalent of the room. The thing that would make all their wishes come true. All I'd like to do, my mum said, with a mixture of pride and humbleness, is go down to the supermarket and buy the nicest piece of steak there. That's all I want. You could do that now, I yelled. You see, what she really wanted was to forego the thing, or things actually, because she could probably have afforded to eat steak from the supermarket every day for the rest of her life that she claimed she wanted. On one occasion, when my wife and I took my parents out for dinner, an unusual event as they hated going to restaurants, we were surprised to see that my mum had actually eaten all of her steak. Then, when we got back home, we found that she'd squirreled half of it away and brought it home wrapped up in a napkin in her handbag. These meat-related sources of regret seemed to run deep in my family. When my mother was in the early stage of what proved to be her terminal illness, my father said that on occasions she did buy steak from the supermarket, always the cheapest cuts, and it was, he said, never very nice. He also said that he had regrets about their diet of the last 50 years. He wished that they had eaten more fat. Not meat, fat. That would have been an excellent wish to have taken into the room. Imagine, your deepest wish is that you had eaten more fat. This is to slightly misrepresent the room, however, for Stalker never claims that the room's powers are retrospective. You can go into the room and eat all the fat you like from now on, but you can't transform the life you have lived into one in which, even during the lean years, you ate heaps of fat. But perhaps that is, and always will be, one's deepest wish, to have the terms of the offer slightly amended so that it can be retrospectively applied, to build a time machine, to go back and have another go, another punt, another throw of the dice, this time knowing the result in advance. The question then, I suppose, is this: is one's deepest desire always the same as one's greatest regret? That's my idea of philosophy. And also, maybe it's a particularly English thing to think that one's deepest desire is always going to be bound up with regret. I don't know, Australia is probably a less regret-filled country than...
What do you think? So, I mean, you've described your writing as it's a form of therapy, isn't it?
No, I've never said that. No.
Well, okay, that's my summation of what you said. You've described the trajectory from book to book as one where you've dipped down into depression, and it's somehow finding a subject in the writing that brings you out of that depression. So that, for me, is a kind of a therapy. And this book.
Okay, it's your festival.
And this film, exactly. Just do what I say. I'm not going to force you reject it. You know, that's the whole thing about a question. You can say, no, you're full of shit. You know?
No, but you go on a little bit more with the question.
Well, what about your personal desires do you work out, or did you work out through your engagement with Stalker?
Oh, well, it's one of the striking things to me about this film. When I finished my book about jazz, I totally lost interest in jazz. I mean, I'd been so obsessed with jazz, and then it just happened that I wasn't interested in it in a while. And what's happened with this book, which only published about 3 months ago, is that already I'm wishing that I could add stuff to it, because I'm learning from other people so much about the film, and you know, I keep seeing it and noticing new things about it. I mean, so the main thing it's done is that my sense of the film's wonder, of its profundity, is continuing to increase. Unfortunately, because of this unbelievably irritating structure that I drew up with the book, it's impossible to add any lines because it's got all these crazy sort of 5-page footnotes. A reviewer said that the footnotes crawl up the wall of the text like moss over an abandoned building, which is a rather appropriately Tarkovsky-esque way of doing things. So I can't make those changes. But, for example, I mean, just to give you an instance of this. So what is the room? Big question. Okay, well, the film is very obviously haunted by memories of the Gulag. It's so clear. I mean, you can see from Stalker, he's got that Zek haircut. Just 2 weeks ago, I was reading Susan Sontag's newly published, the second volume of her diaries, where she has a conversation with Joseph Brodsky, who's Russian, of course. And she tells him that one of the characteristics of men from the camps is they talk all the time in terms of futile absolutes. Futile absolutes. And she says, you know, they talk about things like, as you'd expect from men in prison, the greatest fuck in the world, or the metal bar that you can hide in your shoes that will cut through any bar. And she says, you know, this, of course, is the other side of powerlessness. And it seems to me now that, you know, I wish I had a chance to say in the book that this thing, the room, it's in a way the ultimate futile absolute. This place which promises to give you your deepest desire, and then when it comes to it, it turns out that actually, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for those, you know, maybe it can't do that. It's just this idea that such a place exists that's so important. I haven't forgotten your question, Chip, but the other thing that this, I mean, in a way, it doesn't, I mean, this whole idea of the deepest wish, I think, is in a sense a fiction. And we like this idea, as my mum revealed, but actually life is not like that. It's more, it's a kind of incremental thing. So just in the same way that, it's the same with ambition, really. You know, you don't really, I mean, there might be certain writers, God, there might even be some at this festival who had such a thing, but you don't, when you're setting off, you don't start thinking, I want to win the Nobel Prize, or, you know, or if you're a footballer, I want to win the European Cup. You actually just think, I want to finish a book, or I want to just get to the end of this day's work. It turns out that that's the kind of rewarding, and that's you know, it's not a sort of one-time offer, actually. And so for a while when I was writing this book, all I wanted to do was sit and write this book. And it was great. I was happy. It was fantastic. I was, if you'll allow this kind of I was in the zone for a while. Book came to an end. There I was, back to square one, you know. So that you know, one's deepest desire is having to be reformulated and reforged all the time.
And what stage are you at right now, just so we know? Is this Geoff Low, Geoff Medium, or Geoff? Are you working on something new? It's another way.
There is something. I'm at that great stage now where I'm writing a book which I want to get out of the way. I want to finish it because over the horizon I can see something else that I really want to get onto. You know, so yeah, that's good. That's a good phase.
The zona is out there, and you're doing something on the way to it.
Yeah, that's it. And it's, you know, one of the things that I find so interesting about the writing life, which is why I sort of feel I'm in it for the for the long haul is that I like the way, and this is, I mean, everything is in this film. Writing brings you up against your own limitations in a really big way, you know, and it's just interesting to see whether you can do it. It's even interesting, I think, you know, it sort of even makes the process of your own failing powers interesting. Obviously, I'm not at that stage. I'm at the height of my powers, or thereabouts, you know.
Does it also bring you up against the failure of language? Do you get a sense as a writer, not just of your own failure to express what it is or to do what it is you're trying to do, but do you think there are limitations in this inheritance that we have of the language that we use?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, each medium has some particular thing going for it. So when I was, and it's the other funny, when you're young, you're so confident. So when I wrote my jazz book, you know, I just kind of crashed through the saloon bar doors, you know, and said, "Here I am. This is the greatest book about jazz ever." And it's weird. As you get older, you get less confident. And now I find writing about music just about impossible. With film, there's this sort of the great advantage of it that you don't have to spend a whole paragraph in the script saying, you know, sunset. You can just show a sunset. But there's a whole technical thing going on. So the technical way in which Tarkovsky achieves these effects is so incredibly interesting to me. And when I've some sort of film people have told me what's going on there, but I don't think I'm able to give an absolute answer to that question about language, because it's not every writer is only in receipt, only has available to them his or her linguistic resourcefulness. For me, you know, it became obvious at an early stage that, yeah, my great limitation as a writer was, you know, an inability to think of stories and plots. So I've had to come up with other ways of getting around that. And one of the things I've tended to do is that something tends to go on even in the fiction, sort of structurally, I think, sometimes I think in my novels that the structure ends up taking on some of the load-bearing work, often borne by plot and story.
Well, thank goodness we've got a structure here for you. And we're at the moment in our session where I'd like to have the audience consider questions that they might like to ask Geoff. This is where Geoff works the room.
Yeah.
Here we go, sir.
About halfway through Zona, I think, you talk about where Stalker loses his satchel, and you split off into an anecdote about losing your one-of-a-kind favourite Freytag bag.
Yeah. Have you got it?
Sorry. And I think you write something like 10 days. I know how he feels. 10 days ago, I lost mine at the Adelaide Festival, which I'm assuming was in 2010 when you were at the Adelaide Writers' Week. Not long after I read that, I was watching a YouTube video of you at the French Institute in London about to give a talk about Camus. And as the camera panned in, you leant down and right beside you flipped open what was unmistakably a Freytag bag. A good 12 months after you'd purported to have lost one. Of course, you could have purchased another one-of-a-kind Freytag bags, which, you know, the original one took you 6 years to even like, apparently.
Yeah.
But my question is, while I know you're a lover of finding the kind of essayistic or non-fiction elements within fiction, where do you stand as far as adding fictional elements to works that are ostensibly presented as non-fiction? Where do you draw the line, and do you think there should even be one?
Goodness me. Well, I guess
I'd just like to interrupt for a second. There's a Writers' Week in Adelaide?
Well, I guess the first thing I should say is I do not like being upstaged by a member of the audience at my own gig, the other thing that I should say, just in terms of the background of my losing that bag, the reason I lost it is because I was overexcited because I was hanging out with the Necks at the Adelaide Festival, and I mean they're great guys, but I'm not entirely convinced that one of them didn't steal my bag. I mean honestly, what lowlifes they are. What happened, I mean, if people are interested in the Freytag bag, they used to make these kind of, and also I realise you're a different kind of stalker. You're one of these obsessive internet stalking that footage. Freytag, who make them, they went from making sort of bike messenger bags, they now do a kind of executive briefcase. So I've upgraded to a sort of executive briefcase Freytag thing, so it's great. It's a great question that you've asked. It's really so central to what I'm up to. Because, yeah, I do make stuff up in the books and I reconfigure things to suit me. But the thing is, I'm not a James Frey type person or a Joe Simpson. You know, let's suppose if we learned that Joe Simpson wasn't hanging off that mountaintop in Touching the Void, we'd all feel seriously let down. I mean, I'm not roped to the cliff face of actual experience. The value of the book, really, the things that go on in my books are so ordinary that the changes I make are basically things like, I would say, you know, I had a cup of tea when I'd really had a cup of coffee. It's it's really just small things like that. But I think the key thing with my books, this is what the question really gets at. It's not about did it really happen or didn't it. What is really interesting to me is the formal expectations that readers bring to bear when they read a certain kind of book. So with a certain kind of book, a novel, you go to it expecting a particular kind of pleasure, and you're ready, you're pre-programmed from all your previous reading experiences for a particular kind of experience. It becomes frustrating and disorienting when a book isn't making it clear what it is and therefore how it's expecting to be read. So I think this is the interesting thing for me. I like these writing books which don't behave as you expect them to and which don't readily conform to those formal expectations. So increasingly I like books where there's no introduction at the beginning about what's going to go on. So this book, those really were the first words I read. So you're just plunged in, and then the book will reveal to you in time what it is. And that, from a writer who's unable to think of stories or plots, constitutes a kind of suspense, I think. Thank you you've disappeared again, but thank you for your great question.
Very good.
I just want to know this concept of your deepest dream, what's driving you, whether it is to have the ultimate topspin backhand, or whether you want a bestseller, or whatever it is. And as a writer, whether each book brings you closer to that, as you talk about, as people practicing spiritual practice talk about getting closer to who your true self is. What is the connection as a writer to that and this thing that you've been talking about in the book and in relation to the film?
Gee, you really get high quality questions at this festival, don't you? It's tricky to say. I mean, I really would somewhat go back to my earlier thing, which is that, I'm certainly not in the... I have no eye on the market at all. I have no eye on the sort of readership. There's nothing wrong with being a writer who just wants to sell a lot of books. That's absolutely fine. There's sort of 100 different reasons for writing. But I'm in it for... I don't even know what I'm in it for, is the truth. And what I do know is that it's given me a purpose, and it's given me a way of sort of considering and processing what's happened to me. The sort of spiritual. I mean, am I getting nearer to my to one's true self. Well, it's not. I mean, I'm not so interested in that question. I'm not so. I mean, somebody else was saying this the other day. I mean, it's funny. Somebody was saying that those questions asked by Gauguin in that painting, where do we come from, why are we here? In a way, I think that those are ostensibly big questions are just kid stuff. The bigger question is sort of how to live, really. And one of the great things about being a writer is that everything that happens to you can be turned to advantage, and that gives me a sense of purpose. And I'm aware that's an inadequate response to your question, but that's a sign of the quality of the question. And we'll now move on to what might be an easier question.
We'll see.
But it's a question about Geoff in Venice.
Yeah.
I just wondered if my reading of it was correct, or I guess there's no right or wrong, but what I took from it was in the first half there's a chap goes to a foreign place and finds love, and in the second half a chap, and it's saved, and in the second half the chap goes to a foreign place, doesn't find love, and sort of becomes blissfully lost. I don't know, is that too simplistic a reading of it?
It's not bad for 2 sentences worth.
I have another question about it too, but I'll let you answer that.
The thing there is, I mean, did you say, by the way, Varanasi was a horrible place?
No, I didn't say that at all. I haven't been there, and it didn't come across as horrible
yeah.
in your book.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is, I can see an answer forming. It's great. Okay. This is a book about a film, obviously. And it's a film where there's this place called the Zone. And it occurs to me that in all my writing, I've been attracted to these places, either real or not, sort of zones of one kind or another. So, for example, one of the biggest experiences I had like that, where I really, when I went to the cemeteries on the Western Front and went to that big Thiepval monument to the missing of the Somme, and there it is, the power of that place. I mean, the incredible power of it. Since then, I've been to lots of places. I've been to the Walter de Maria's lightning field, loads of places, ruined Buddhist temples in Thailand. I mean, I write a lot about this in the Yoga for People Who Can't Be Bothered to Do It bit. I'm interested in these places where if you had some kind of spiritual Geiger counter, you would come to this place and it would just start going nuts. And those have always been the sort of peak experiences in my life. So this is a sort of peak experience. It's an artistic experience. It's a film, but it's right up there with any actual experiences I've had. And I've certainly never been in a place where where the Geiger counter goes more nuts than it does in Varanasi. I mean, as I've said before, Richard Dawkins, who's, if he goes to Varanasi, he would be aware, something remarkable was going on here as a result of this crazy, mad religion being practiced there for all these thousands of years. It's sunk into the buildings. The molecules of the city have been changed. This is scientific fact by the Hinduism that's been practiced there. So yeah, there's a sort of deep continuity there, I think, with it. And same with Venice. Venice is a sort of profoundly charged place. Thank you. Do we have
time for one more question?
One more, yeah.
Right. That's you.
Great.
Yep.
Hi. It occurs to me that Varanasi is actually like the Zone. But anyway, doesn't matter. I get that you love Stalker because that's the first Tarkovsky you saw. Is that right? And I just wondered, would it have made any difference if, like, Andrei Rublev or one of the others, or Solaris was... And do you now go back and look at other Tarkovsky?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, so I think Mirror and Stalker are sort of paired. I think they're on a par. Andrei Rublev, I just find it a little bit on the boring side. Solaris has got great bits in it. I really, really like the remake, which I know tends to make me seem like an idiot, but I just do.
It actually made me want to see the remake.
Oh, right.
That
Okay.
bit in,
In the book. And then the thing is, the weird thing that happened to Tarkovsky, this artist who was, we saw as being this person, sort of victim of Soviet persecution. In fact, he had an incredibly sort of privileged niche, really. And, as we used to say in the 80s, there's no way he could have raised the dough to make films like this in the West. And then when he came to the West and was given the freedom to do everything he wanted, it was either too late, or I don't know what happened, but those last two films seem to me deeply self-parodic. And all those classic Tarkovsky things which have such primal power, the wind whipping, all that, it's lost. And I think, as Wim Wenders said, it seems like it all comes in it seems very self-derivative to me. We have one more, perhaps?
Maybe we can just squeeze one more, if
Yep.
there is one more.
Okay. Okay, you
If
shout
you
it
yell.
and I'll repeat it.
Only
Yeah.
if you yell.
Yes. Book on tennis.
Yeah.
Great. Very few books. Lionel Shriver wrote a good novel.
Yeah.
On tennis, but that is the only one I can think of where you get I think you're great if you keep going.
Well, thank you very much.
This is a call for a book on tennis. Now,
book
if you
on
were
tennis.
commercially minded,
Yeah. I'd know that I had
There's the
one
market.
sale. Yeah, that's right. No, it's what I'm so conscious of is that I've been writing books for long enough now to know that there's a particular window that's available, and you have to be really alert to that. And I just so feel that train has now departed, unfortunately. But I guess it could conceivably come round again. What I'm really pleased is that I managed to hop on this unscheduled bus when I did. But by the time you get to my age, I'm 53. I mean, you've got George Steiner a couple of years ago published this book, My Unwritten Books, where he reflects on the books he didn't write. And as one's stack of books that you have written mounts up, so also I'm aware now there is this other stack building up of the books that I won't write, and so the tennis book is right at the top of that stack. Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, Geoff tells us he's not a commercially minded author, but after this session we will be selling copies of the book, and Geoff will be signing copies up at the Ruth Cracknell room. So without anything else, I think, to say at this moment, I think we should probably thank you for coming here, and please join me in thanking
Thank you,
Geoff
Chip,
Dyer.
for getting into the... Thank you so much. You did brilliantly.